This is the opening of An Inspector Calls, and this is when they start to speak. And whenever you analyse a text, really the first impressions are what count, and particularly in drama, a good playwright will really signal to an audience exactly the sort of character that we're dealing with right from the opening, and this really is no exception. Look at what Burling says to Gerald. Interesting that he's talking to Gerald right from the start. He's not talking to his son. He's talking to his son-in-law to be, and he says, you ought to like this port, Gerald. As a matter of fact, Finchley told me it's exactly the same port your father gets from him. What do we learn? Well, a number of things. That Gerald is obviously someone who enjoys port. That Gerald's father is someone who enjoys port. That Burling has got the port from the same man, or from the same place that the father gets it from. And so Burling clearly has aspirations towards being like Gerald's father. We learn that Finchley's the governor, so this man obviously has status. So straight away we get this first line of the play, and we get Burling really establishing his pretensions, his desire towards being something other than he is. And then we get Sheila here, and look what she says. She says here, gaily possessively. Just there, look. Sheila gaily possessively. Gaily means happily, but also possessively. So underneath that happy surface, there is a sense of her already taking some possession of Gerald, some ownership of him through the engagement. Go down the page a little bit. Mrs. Burling. Mrs. Burling smiling very well, then just a little thank you. We get a sense already of Mrs. Burling being a little bit cold, rather formal, and we can imagine her slightly separate from the group. She then calls to Edna, and Edna says, "Yes, ma'am." And then Burling says, "Tell cook that it was first class. The meal was first class." Mrs. Burling reproachfully sort of telling him off. "Arthur, you're not supposed to say such things." Well, why not? Well, because when you are of an upper class, you don't tell the cook that the food was good. You just accept that it's good because it's supposed to be good. Let's just look at the bottom here, just before we finish. This little bit at the bottom here, and then at the top of the page, because this is our first clue. Our first clue of something which has happened before the play has begun. It's what we call backstory, the story before the play begins. Gerald says at the bottom here, "In fact, I insist upon being one of the family. I've been trying long enough, haven't I?" He then repeats, "Haven't I?" So obviously he's been trying to marry Sheila for some time. And then Sheila says, "Except for last summer when you never came near me, and I wondered what had happened to you, Gerald, and I've told you I was awfully busy at the works all that time." Same tone as before, Sheila, that's what you say. So, what do we learn from this? Something's happened, hasn't it? For some reason, the previous summer, Gerald didn't spend much time with Sheila. And although Sheila is being slightly playful, there is a serious tone. She's clearly concerned about the reasons why Gerald was away from her for that summer. Gerald, you can imagine him slightly snappily saying, "I've told you I was awfully busy at the works all that time." So something's happened in the summer before this play begins. This play is set in April, the April of the Titanic sinking. And so we already get a sense of something which has preceded the play. And this something is something that the inspector, when he arrives, will really start to unpick. So that's just a little opening, a little sense of some of the characters. And what we'll do in the next screencast is we'll look a little bit about the character of Eric, because we learn a little bit about Eric from the very opening.